This is Dave McIsaac, and you're listening to the Sheriff Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to an exclusive episode of The Sheriff. Guys, tonight I am blessed to have with me a legend. And I'm calling him a legend because he's a legend in my mind my entire life. He is one of the greatest Toronto Maple Leaf goal scorers of all time. He was personally my coach when I was younger in my journey. The theme for today's episode, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be talent, skill, and goals. And these topics are going to come up multiple times in the episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Rick Vaive, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I am fantastic. Fortunately, I just watched my son's team lose, but that's okay. Even though it's their fourth loss in a row.
Well,
But
I mean, it's always good for the family support, buddy. So I'm sure that we're talking about Justin. I'm sure that Justin appreciated seeing the old man in the stands. It pumped him up. Sometimes that's all that really matters, as we both know from playing. As long as we get to see our family, even if the team doesn't pull out a W that day, we're still happy that we're able to see the family, right, Rick?
oh, absolutely. And hopefully we'll get down to Cincinnati in the new year to watch him play on a weekend where he's playing maybe a Wednesday, Friday, Saturday at home or something. And we haven't seen him play live in I don't know how many years. And thankfully they have the ECHL has their games on Flow Sports now, and it's kind of neat because we can sit down in the basement, watch it on the big screen, and we can have our coffee when we want. We can do whatever, eat what we want. We don't have to work. It's kind of nice.
Awesome. And Rick, like it is super cool that it is Cincinnati too, right? And like, I mean, like Coach Payne was on the show just a couple weeks ago. We had a great chat with him, and it seems like this team, the Cyclones this year, is going to be really, really good, man. They got a great group of guys, and Coach Payne was really, really excited. So he was all fired up. This is when they were just, I think, just a handful of games into the season. So yeah, that's wonderful that it's Cincinnati, because we seem to have a little bit of a Cincinnati connection on this show too, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, Rick, I've been looking forward to this interview for a very long time, and like one of the reasons is because I'm just a huge Toronto Maple Leaf fan. I grew up in Scarborough, and I was a diehard Leaf fan pretty much until I was an adult. I still support them behind the scenes, but I'm just a huge Leaf fan in general. And one story I want to tell you before I start picking your brain is, when I was about 10 years old, Gary Lehman, he was the guy, right? He was the guy about to score 50 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And there was one common theme that I kept hearing that I could never understand, because I started watching hockey after you left Toronto, right? And I started watching it when Gary Lehman was there. He's about to score 50, and they're saying, this has not been done since the great Rick Vaive scored 50 3 seasons in a row. And I remember thinking, who is this Rick Vaive guy, man? I got to figure out who he is. I ended up figuring that out, but I just wanted to tell you that little story of when I first heard your name. Man, I was such a youngster, such a Leaf fan, and I'm like, man, if this Rick Vaive guy did what Gary's going to do 3 times over, I hope I meet him one day, right?
Yeah.
So Rick, yeah, no problem, buddy. So Rick, I want the listeners to know this man that I look up to so much about his beginnings. Now, I know that you were born in Ottawa and lived there for the first 10, 11 years of your life. I want to talk about the nation's capital a little bit, because I think it's important to talk about the roots of the players, of the guests that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in Ottawa in 59. I lived there actually until I was 8, just a little older than 8. My dad worked for Dominion Bridge, but he had an accident. He fell 40 feet, got hit with a beam, and was in the hospital for probably a year and a half. So he couldn't work on steel anymore. So he started working for a company that made altimeters and, the lights for aircraft. And they were opening up. My mother's from Prince Edward Island, from Charlottetown. They were opening up a plant in Amherst, Nova Scotia. They asked him if he'd like to go out there and head up that new plant. Well, he said, sure, why not? So we go to Amherst, Nova Scotia. 2 years later, they shut down. So over to PEI we go. And, that's where he started his own painting company. And, God rest his soul, my dad, he worked his tail off and from scratch, started his own business. It was really successful for a number of years until they built the bridge, and then brick and siding and everything was a lot cheaper to bring over. And because back then, most of the houses in Charlottetown were wood shingles. So they needed to be painted every 2 or 3 years. So business was great until the bridge was built. That kind of hurt everything. So that's how I ended up. That's how I ended up in PEI.
Yeah, and this is Claude that we speak of, right? Claude Vaive, and your mother was Mary Vaive, correct, Rick?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So Claude. All right. So Claude followed, the path of success. You guys end up in PEI. Now, one of the things, I'm glad that we actually are at this point right now, because one of the things I'd really like to talk to you about is, do you remember the international Pee Wee tournament?
Yep.
When we were in Pee Wee. So now this was, you were playing for Amherst, okay? Yep. This is back in 70 and 71, Rick. Okay. Now
don't say that so loud.
Hey, listen, I'm telling you, I brought up the Pee Wee tournament to some of my guests, and we're talking 50s and 60s. Buddy, you're a young buck, man. You're a young buck, Rick. So do you remember though the Pee Wee tournament and how exciting that was?
Oh man, do I ever. I mean, it was like, it was kind of it was a big eye opener for me anyway. I mean, I was, I think, 10 years old the first year I went, 11 the second year I went. And I mean, it was just unbelievable. You got a building that's got like 10 or 12,000 people in it. And we had practices on outdoor rinks that were not far from the Coliseum. But we lost both years in overtime in our first game, got beat out. But they were smart about it. They planned a bunch of exhibition games in the Quebec City area. So we went around and played some exhibition games. So we got to stay up there for about a week, roughly. And it was just, I mean, when you look back at it now, it's like, wow, like that was unbelievable. Like, and then of course you go on and play in the National Hockey League. But at that time, you're not thinking about that as much. You're just thinking about, holy cow, I'm looking around, I got 12,000 people or 13 in this building, and I'm 10 years old.
Yeah, no, and it's quite incredible. And like that's why whenever I see that a guest participated in that tournament, I always have to bring it up, because for me, like you said, when we look back on our careers, obviously we have our adult life, then there's the junior, right? And then the pro, the junior. But if you go younger, I find that the Pee Wee tournament in Quebec stands out so much compared to anything else pre getting drafted to the NHL. So
it really does. And the funny thing about that too is that we had teams from the U.S., but the teams from Europe were not coming over yet. And then eventually a lot of the European teams started coming over. I think there might have been a couple when I was playing in it, but mainly U.S. and Canada. And then now, I mean, there's teams from all over the world attending that tournament. It's crazy.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
No, it's great. So, okay, now this is a curiosity question that I have for you, Rick. Now, like being from Ottawa, I know a lot of the residents of Ottawa are blessed with being bilingual, right? Now, your grandparents were across the river in Gatineau, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but was it Lionel and Reina?
Yeah, I believe
is that
it was.
How you pronounce it?
Yeah, they've been gone for so long. It's something that you kind of forget over time, but I do believe those were their first names. Yes, those were my
Awesome.
dad's parents. Yeah.
And what I'm getting at with this, Rick, is were you bilingual from being young, at like a young boy? Like, are you a bilingual Canadian?
Unfortunately, I'm not, and I should be, and I wish I was. I really believe my sister's a year older than I am, so I would have had up until 8.5. She would have been 9.5 to learn both languages. We could have went to English school, French at home, or vice versa.
Yeah.
But my father never taught us how to speak French, and I never understood why until years later when I realized, oh, I get it now, because he taught my mother how to speak French. And whenever they didn't want us to know what they were talking about, they spoke French. So that's why he didn't teach us how to speak French.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, that's one of the things that I have very few regrets in my life. That's one, that I never learned French while I was living in Ottawa as well as English, because there would have been nothing better for me than to be bilingual, considering I started playing junior hockey in Sherbrooke, Quebec.
Yes,
so it would have been fantastic. It would have been great just for life to be able to speak two languages.
So now, okay, here's a quick question. Now you mentioned your sister. Is your sister better at French than you?
Probably not. She lives in Cape Breton.
Okay, all right, okay, right on. Now, if you had said yes, then I would say, Rick, there's a few things that we have in common. First of all, our sisters are better at French than we are. Secondly, yes, I wish that I learned more French too. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we're starting to get quite a wide range of listeners, right, Rick?
Mm-hmm.
And we like to kind of, put things on pedestals that we believe in. And I'm telling you, man, the thing that keeps coming up over and over again is being bilingual, how big of an advantage it is. So I wish I paid attention in French class, Rick, when I was younger. I wish I took the extra, French classes in high school and stuff like that. Because, man, I was in Quebec for over a handful of years, playing in the semi-pro league, so on and so forth. And man, I would have just had such a better life if I could just figure out that language. And I'm sure you feel the same way, right?
I totally agree with you 100%. And it's funny because I try to get my boys to go to French immersion school. They didn't want any part of that. I wasn't going to force them. Now I'm talking to my oldest son and trying to talk him into putting our grandson into French immersion so that he is bilingual. Of course, my son, smart ass that he is, saying, well, what the hell do you need that for? And I said, well, just think about how helpful that is for him, the amount of jobs it opens up for him and everything else. Not to mention if he ever becomes an athlete of any kind and plays junior or whatever, he can converse with people as well as English. And he said, I don't think so. I'm going to keep hammering it into him, though, and try to make sure that happens.
Definitely. You got to stay on that, Rick. 100%. Loving where this is going now. Sherbrooke. Now, is it the Castors? Is that what the name was in an English accent?
It was La Castor.
La Castor.
And that was the Beavers in French, obviously. And I loved it there. I mean, it was a unbelievable place to play junior hockey. I mean, we averaged probably about 4,500, 5,000 a game. In the playoffs, we'd get 6,500. And we lived right across the street from the rink. We all lived, it was an old priest residence, and they bought the building, they did it over, and there was, I don't know how many rooms, but there was bunk beds in each room. So you had a roommate, you had a sink and dressing cabinet in your room, and you had a closet, you had everything right in your own room. And it was 2 floors. In the basement, we had a kitchen where we had cooks that cooked our food. So we had our lunch and our supper and everything there. And we had a couple of women in the back that did our laundry. I mean, you couldn't ask for any more than that. You're with the guys all the time and hanging out, watching TV. There was one French room that was for French TV and an English room. And we had a bumper pool table and stuff in another room. It was a blast. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm assuming that you had a good time scoring 51 in your rookie season, right? Right?
Yeah, well, I had great line mates. Jerry Gillis, who got picked the year before or 2 years before I did by Vancouver, and
Okay.
he scored 20 goals with Vancouver in his rookie season. And
Right on.
Green, who's from Philadelphia, believe it or not, and he was my centerman. So I had great line mates and that year, and ended up winning Rookie of the Year in the whole league. And then the next year, 76 goals and 100, I don't know, 58 points or whatever the heck it was.
Exactly.
And
But hey, you're not getting off that easily. We're not done with the stat line. That second year, let's talk about the 199 penalty minutes to go with the 158 points and the 76 goals in 68 games. So how did you rack up 200 PIMs, Rick? Were you scrapping that year? Like, what was going on?
Well, I hated to lose, and I hated to get beat one-on-one or anything, and that got me into trouble a little bit sometimes on the ice, where guys would give me a slash or something, and then the next thing you know, the gloves are off. But I'll never forget my first fight in the Quebec League, and it was what's his name? I can't. Mario Marois. Okay, who played in the NHL.
Yeah.
And so we drop the gloves, we square off, and I have no idea that he's a lefty. No one told me. Well, he hit me with about 6 punches before I could even grab a hold of his sweater. And I got a few licks in myself, but you know what? I always felt that if I stick my nose in there, and I did it in the WHA when I was 19 as well. Yeah. I fought a lot because if I just said, look, I want everybody to know that I'm not going anywhere. You can do whatever you want to me, but I'm not going anywhere. If I'm in front of the net, do whatever you want. I'm not leaving. I'm staying here, and I'm going to get a rebound or a tip in or something. So in order to do that, you got to kind of let them know that, you know, by fighting that, you know, hey, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to protect myself. Now, I didn't win that many, unfortunately.
Well,
but
I mean,
you know what? I showed up.
You showed up, and you must have fired up the boys on the bench, because they're looking on the ice at their 70-something goal man and saying, hey, man, if the guy that's scoring 70 is sacrificing his body, we got to appreciate that, right? So you know how it goes with the team camaraderie. So I'm sure whenever that happened, man, that must have been appreciated so much, buddy. I had to bring it up because –
yeah. I think you're right. I think I didn't realize that, but you know, now that you mention it, I think that probably helped the team a lot, because, you know, like you say, you got a guy who's a goal scorer who's out there fighting and sticking up for his teammates and that sort of thing, and they're going, well, if he can do it, then we have to do it. You know, yeah. we have to play the same way. And you're right. I never really thought of it like that until you just mentioned it, and come to think of it, it's a good point.
And no, but Rick, honestly, like, okay, for me, so at the pro level, unfortunately, I had to kind of be the designated tough guy, right? I was doing whatever I could to play at the highest levels. So for me, a guy that was expected to do it, when I saw Thomas Vanek, Jason Pominville, whoever, Derek Roy, whoever it was, fighting when I was playing in Rochester, like that fired me up so much to know that our goal scorers were doing this job that I knew how hard it was. And anyone that's done it, they know they don't want to do it, right? They're seeing you do it. It's going to fire them up. So I guarantee you that was the situation, Rick, for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right. And, you know, but then again, back then, I mean, the game was so different, right?
Yes,
I mean,
it was.
A lot more people fought back then than they do now. You know, you don't see the stars fighting anymore. You know, I remember watching, and I forget who it was, Jerome McGinley, and there was another star on another team.
Vincent Lecavalier in Tampa Bay.
And they went at it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, that's great. Like, I love that. I think it's fantastic that both those guys went at each other. It was, you know, it was a heat of the moment thing. And I'm sure the guys on the bench were fired up about it too. But you don't see that anymore. Like, it's like, you know, you don't, it's just, it's gone. It's not in the game anymore. The game has changed so much. And
100.
I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, I kind of wish it was somewhere between when I played and the way the game is played today, somewhere in the middle, because I love the talent of the players today. The skill level is off the charts with some of these guys. But I'd like to see a little more physicality in the game and not necessarily fighting. Yeah, I would like to see a few more fights here and there, but more physicality for me and the skill that these guys have. The game, I think, would be a lot more exciting.
Yeah, for sure, Rick. And I agree with you. And I just had a quick follow-up question to that. So, as a former player, like a guy that played a long time in the NHL, add the WHA, you got 1,000 games, right? And it's like, do you believe that in your time that the guys that did fight more, that there's ways that they could have been protected a little bit more? Like maybe after like a fifth fighting major, maybe they qualified for like a different type of insurance or something, just with the outfall of all the head injuries and the suing the league. And do you think that they could have done a little bit more protecting the players that were physical?
Absolutely, no question. But that again, that was a thing in the league. I mean, when I played 21 teams, I bet you only eight of them had certified trainers, and the rest of the teams did not.
Yeah.
Now, that's a recipe for a disaster right there. When you got guys going out and fighting, and getting concussions and those types of things, because these guys don't know what to do. And the doctors back then didn't know a whole lot about head injuries and that sort of thing either. So, I mean, the game has come a long way in that sense. One thing I will say that I do love about today's game is that they look after the players a hell of a lot better than they did in my day, and probably even when you played.
Yep.
But I like the fact that the players have a lot more power now. I really do, because I played in an era where Al Eagleson was the head of our player association. We had no power. We had no power whatsoever. It was Al Eagleson and the owners, and whatever they wanted, Al gave, and we had no power whatsoever. So I am really happy to see the players now having power in the National Hockey League, which they didn't have probably until about 15 years ago. So, when you think about it, all those years of the National Hockey League where the players had no power whatsoever, and now they finally do, and it's refreshing to see that.
It's definitely refreshing, and it's moving in the right direction. But Rick, I feel, because I'm a multi-sport guy, one of my younger brothers plays professional basketball, I feel that the NHL is like the last league to become a players' league. Compared to like the NBA, LeBron James and those guys, that's a players' league. The NHL is getting there, but they're really far from, where some of the other leagues are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, when you look at the NBA, for instance, like all of a sudden, like LeBron and two other guys decide we're going to go to Miami and we're going to win some championships. Like,
yeah,
I mean, in the NHL, I mean, you don't do that, right?
Could you imagine?
It just doesn't happen. I mean, it'd be great if all of a sudden, guys like McDavid and Ovechkin and were free agents the same year, and they decided, you know what, let's go to this Washington. Yeah, well, I'm going to go to Washington, and we're going to win a few cups, But that doesn't happen. But you also got to look at revenues too. I mean, you look at the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball compared to hockey. It's it's unbelievable, the difference. I mean, you're talking 500-600 billion as opposed to 10 or 15 or 20 billion. So you got to look at those things and think, okay, the players, unfortunately in the NBA and everything else, they have that power because if they don't play, they don't bring in that revenue. Those guys have a lot of power, and the NHL is quite a bit different. They do have a long way to go to catch up to the other professional leagues.
Right on. No, and I agree with you. So I'm definitely thank you for sharing that insight. I appreciate that for sure. So now it's cool that we're talking about leagues because I want to talk about these well I call them the baby bulls now that I've done all the research, right? But like officially it was the Birmingham Bulls. Sorry, I was stuttering because I'm thinking Alabama. Now this is Birmingham, Alabama though, right, Rick?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the
Yeah.
Birmingham Bulls, aka the Baby Bulls. Now, I just want to give a little bit of background to the listeners. The reason for this is because star young players like Mr. Rick Vaive would sign underage contracts, right, Rick? You
Yep.
signed an underage contract with in the WHA to be able to play on this Birmingham team, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And there was a few other players, not many, but a few other young stars that were in similar situations. Guys like Michel Goulet, right?
Yeah. Well, there was the original 6 baby bulls were Rob Ramage, Craig Hartsburg, Pat Riggin, oh God, what's his name? Played in Peterborough. Keith Crowder.
Okay.
And Gaston Gingras. Okay. So they were all Bill Waters clients. So, Eagleson, Bill was still with Eagleson at the time. And so we all kind of went together. Michel Goulet and Louis Slager came on their own. Now, Michel Goulet was only 18 and we were all 19. And Keith Crowder went back to Peterborough in November because he wasn't playing much and decided to go back to junior. And they ended up winning the Memorial Cup. And I was there in Verdun when he won the Memorial Cup on my way back to PEI from Birmingham. So I got to stop in Verdun and go watch him win the Memorial Cup and see him afterwards. And it was kind of neat because he was my roommate down there. When he left, I was kind of devastated because we got along so good. And, then they put Pat Riggin in with me, and it was a little different. Pat was a goalie. Pat left a lot of things laying around and didn't clean up a whole lot. so
I know how it is.
So I had to do all that. But it was, it was a great opportunity for us. The year before, 76 goals, 150 some points in the Quebec League. And I thought, you know what? I think, and they offered me a lot of money under the table to stay and play in Sherbrooke.
I'm sure they did.
More than what I made in Birmingham, but it
no
wasn't
way. Come on. Really?
No,
junior team offered more than a pro team.
Well, that was like under the table, so there was
no. I know.
So it would have been more money than what I made in Birmingham.
Okay.
But that wasn't the issue. I kept telling my general manager, it's not about the money. You can offer me whatever you want, and I'm not going to take it because I want to go and play against men and pros and get better and get ready for the NHL. Because at that point in time, after my junior, I kind of had a pretty good feeling that I was going to be able to play in the National Hockey League. And
of course,
that was my intentions of going to Birmingham was because of that. So, but it was a great year. We had a lot of fun. We didn't make the playoffs, and then of course a merger happened that summer between the WHA and the NHL, and of course they weren't going to let us in with all those young guys on the same team.
Yeah, imagine that.
Give us a good general manager and a good coach, and we'd probably win a Stanley Cup within 5 years, more than likely. So, but it was fun. It was great. It was a little different being down in the South where people didn't know what the hell was going on in a hockey game. I mean, like our biggest crowd was when it was Bear Bryant night, who was the coach of the Crimson Tide at the time. Yeah. And we filled the building, but we had a loyal, I would say 10,000 fans that were loud and loved the game down there. And so we couldn't ask for anything more than being there and getting to play in professional hockey and the fun that we had together.
Yeah, Rick, but like your world must have just flipped right around at that time. I mean, first off, just demographically, I mean, Sherbrooke, Quebec, man. I mean, first of all, okay, I just want to talk about Sherbrooke a little bit. Sherbrooke is such a cool town. When I played in that semi-pro league, they had a team. I believe it's the same arena that you probably played in. And I know what you mean by that housing because I remember because we had to drive to these games, driving to that rink, going down those hills to get to
Hmm.
the rink from the main street of the downtown Centerville. Like it's so cool, man, right? And
Yeah.
so you're going from those incredible winters, those white Christmases, like, and then you're going to friggin' Alabama
Birmingham. Yeah.
the next year playing hockey,
Well,
going
the
in
funny,
shorts to
yeah,
practice.
the funny part about that was we all of us lived in the same apartment complex. Like there was just buildings all around, and there was several pools and tennis courts, and they closed the pool down in October, and it's like 75 degrees, and we're like, what the hell's going on? Like, why are you closing the pools? Like, and then even a month later in November, it's probably 60 degrees, and people are walking around with parkas on, and we're walking around with shorts, t-shirts, and it
Like
was
you're on
pretty,
vacation.
yeah, it was pretty wild. But what I loved about it though is I love the fact that when things weren't going as good as you expected them to be going, whatever, you're going through a slump or your team's just not playing that well, you get away from it. You go play golf, go play tennis, go, there are so many things that you could do outside to take your mind
Distractions.
away from that,
Yeah.
to get, park it over there and go have some fun. And that was a big plus for me when I was there. I mean, because you're 19 years old. I mean, you're going to have some times where you're going to be thinking, holy cow, and then, but I could go, well, no, I'm going to go tee it up and play some golf today. So, and that would take it all away, and I wouldn't even think about it for 4 hours, and it was great.
That's unbelievable, man. I hear you. And perfect example. My best friend played in the South. I played in the North. He had my golf clubs. He used them a lot. If I had them, I would never use them playing in the North my whole pro career, right? So it's interesting how that works. Like, there's a lot more activities to do in the winter in the South.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless you're
And people, I hear people saying, like I don't know how players can play in Florida and California and Texas and Arizona, and I always tell them, I say, listen, you know what? It's probably better playing in a climate like that because during a grueling 82 game season, you have time to get away from the things that are going on and something to distract you from thinking about the game last night that we lost or I played lousy or whatever the case might be. The opportunity is there to go and unwind and get that stuff out of your mind and not let it sink in there and then come back refreshed the next day, ready to go again.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. Couldn't agree with you more. So this is where it gets exciting for me because I'm such a fan, eh, Rick? Like I'm a former player, but I'm a fan of the game and the history. And so now we got this merger, this NHL WHA merger. And so you being an underage in the league, you're eligible to enter the NHL draft because of the
Yeah.
merger, right? So that was pretty cool. How did you learn about that? Like that was going to happen?
Well, actually, it was funny because when the merger happened, they went to an 18-year-old draft that year in 1979.
Okay.
So they were drafting 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and 20-year-olds. So there was 3 years of the draft in there. So that might have been one of the best first rounds and second rounds of all time in the draft because of all the players that were available to be drafted. And if you look at, the first round, there was Ramage, Mike Foligno. I forget who the third guy was, went to St. Louis. Mike Gardner was fourth. I was fifth. Craig Hartsburg was sixth. Ray Bork was seventh. Michel Goulet was 20th.
Really?
But I believe that was part of the merger was nobody could take him. He was going to Quebec. I think
Oh,
that was part of it, that Quebec said,
okay.
okay, we want Michel Goulet. He played junior there with the Ramparts. We
Yeah.
want him here in Quebec. And they said, okay, so nobody will touch him then until you pick. So when you look at that first round and even the second round, boy, there were some really good players that played. Laurie Boschman was in that draft. Ray Allison, Brian Propp. I mean, gosh, I can't even remember half the guys that were in that draft, but it was a good one.
I think it's by far the strongest draft of all time. By far. Has to be.
Yeah, I would think if you go first, second rounds, I think if you look at both the first and second rounds, 42 players that were drafted, and compare them to the first and second rounds of any other year, I think you're going to find that those 2 rounds played more NHL games probably than any other draft. Because it was filled with great players, and not superstars, all of them, but some of them. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is when you leave junior, we're all the best player on our team growing up, all the way up, and you get to junior, then maybe you're not the best player, maybe you're the 3rd best player or the 4th best player. Then you get to the NHL, and all of a sudden, wow, I might be the 8th best forward. So some guys have to, adapt to a different role. And, that the guys that are good players and are able to adapt to a 3rd or 4th line role and have a long career, my cap to those guys, because doing that is very, very difficult when you're the best player all the way up. And all of a sudden you got to take on a different role, a checking role or penalty kill role. You don't play power play, but you play 15, 16 years, and my cap's off to those guys that are able to get the game.
Perfect, and man, I'm so glad that you brought this up, man, because perfect example. I had Joe Thornton's cousin, Scott Thornton, on as a special guest. Now, this is a guy. He was drafted early first round.
Yeah.
He was the best where he came from. He had to adapt to that 2nd, 3rd line role.
Yep.
The man played 1,000 games, Rick, just like you, right? And that type of career, that's a nice career.
Oh, absolutely.
1,000 games?
Well, I didn't get 1,000 in. I got 876.
If you add the WHA, Rick, it's just under that, man.
Yeah. Now,
pro games, you're 900 plus.
Scotty played like 17 or 18 years, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he played over 1,000 NHL games.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so it was definitely that amount of years. Some seasons maybe closer to 40 to 50 other than the 80. So, but he played over 1,000 NHL games, and that's a phenomenal NHL career. Well,
especially considering what he had to do, right? I mean, he had to adjust his game and play a different style of game to survive in the NHL and stay in the NHL. And there's a lot of guys coming up today, young kids that don't understand that maybe they may have to play a little differently in the show because they're not in junior anymore. And they're not able to adjust to that. And, that's my biggest thing, what I see with some players. They're not able to adjust to a different role once they get to the National League. And if they were able to, they'd last a lot longer because they're still going to score 15, 20 goals, even playing on the 3rd line and sometimes 4th line, 12, 15 goals. Well, that's going to keep you in the NHL for a long time.
Yes, 100%, man. This is where it gets really exciting for me, buddy, at this part, because I'm going over this timeline. So now, 5th overall, probably the best draft to ever exist. Pretty high expectations for Mr. Rick Vaive. Drafted to Vancouver Canucks.
Mm-hmm.
You produce right away, but you're part of a trade your first season, right? Now, what's interesting for a Toronto native's perspective is the transaction, man. The transaction that it was. Now, this was friggin' sorry, Rick. I just got to get this right. So now Dave Tiger Williams is involved in this trade, right? There's multiple players that are involved, but Dave Tiger Williams, I mean, probably one of the most popular Leafs of all time, is going the other way in this trade. Now, I understand that the gentleman that came with you, he was like, did he end up being your setup man? Like,
Yeah, Billy
on the line in Toronto?
Builder Lego, yeah. And he was picked 4th overall the year before me by Vancouver. And it was kind of, now Vancouver needed a guy like Tiger Williams at that time because they had given up Jack McElharvey and a bunch of the older guys and some of their toughness, and they wanted a guy like Tiger. Personally, I think they gave up too much because Billy was a heck of a player too. And, but Tiger got them to the Stanley Cup finals a couple of years after the trade. They didn't win the cup, but they got there, and we were never able to accomplish that in Toronto. So, it is what it is.
Well, this is one thing that caught my eye pretty quick when I'm looking at like the Toronto era of your career, buddy. So the first full season with Toronto. Now you're putting up 33 goals in your second year, in your pretty much your second year pro, okay? Second year in the NHL, okay? 62 points, Rick. You're almost a point per game at this point, at this young time of your age. But now, you knowing me, what I'm looking at as well, 229 penalty minutes. Your first full season with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You must have chucked them that season. You were trying to show people that not to mess with you, right? Because
I did my first few years in the NHL similar to the WHA because I didn't want them thinking that they were going to be able to run me out of the building or anything like that, just because I was scoring goals and that sort of thing. But I also like to play physical game too. So, that was part of me as a kid, even when I was young. I loved playing a physical game, and that I kind of brought that along with me. But it was funny because when Mike Nickluck came in, I think it was my second or third year in Toronto, and I was still doing a lot of fighting, and he sat me down. Well, Mike was great because he would call guys into his office and just have a conversation. And it wasn't necessarily always about hockey. It was about life. It was about everything. But he said to me the one day, Rick, he says, we need you on the ice to score goals. We can't afford to have you in the penalty box. And I was sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, thank God. I don't have to get punched in the face anymore. Well, I do because I'm still going to go and do it sometimes, but I don't have to do it as often. And, that was kind of nice for him to say that. And, and lo and behold, that was the year I scored the 54 goals the first year. It was when his first year as our coach.
Okay, so now this is like prime time, like Rick Vaive right now. This is about breaking records, setting records. This is an awesome time right now. Now, Rick, okay, so the Toronto Maple Leafs, they say, the second oldest team in history. They say Montreal is. I don't really know if all the six would have started at the same time, but whatever. Toronto supposed to be pretty much the oldest team in history. Now, dude, you're the only guy to score 50 goals more than one season. You did it 3 times, okay?
Yep.
So now that is an incredible record, Rick. So congratulations on that. What impresses me is the consistency of it. You're playing pretty much every single regular season game in those 3 years. Like you missed like less than a handful of games all 3 seasons, okay? So that's one. The second is you're not a guy that's putting up, 40, 50 goals and having 60 points. You're setting guys up, man. You're a playmaker as well, Rick, right? So that's what impresses me. And you had over 110 penalty minutes every single season. You scored 50. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
it
was.
Who were you, Eric Lindros, back in the day?
No. I got to tell you, Eric Lindros, for 5 years, he was the most dominant player in the National League by far because of his size, his skill, and everything. I mean, I wasn't quite at his level because I wasn't as big as he was. If I was my youngest boy's size, 6'6", 245, then maybe I could have been Eric Lindros or
you said 6'6", 245, your youngest son?
Yeah, he's a monster. He's a big boy. And but anyway, I really enjoyed that. And it was funny the first year because when I got to about 44 or 45 goals, the press were saying, hey, what would it be like to be the first Maple Leaf to ever score 50 goals in a season? Well, I never knew that nobody had ever done it before. I figured, Dave Keon, all the great players that played for the Maple Leafs over the decades, I figured somebody had to have scored 50 goals. Well, lo and behold, no one did. And I was the first, which, was an unbelievable achievement. And I still remember Frank Mahovlich had the record of 48. I broke his 49. And the next day he came down to the rink and had pictures taken with me. And I thought, you know what? That is the coolest thing. Like the big M coming down. Get pictures taken with me after I broke his record of 48 goals. And that, for me, that was like unbelievable. It was like, wow, like this is, because if you go way back to when I was 12 years old, the Montreal Canadiens played the Voyageurs, a farm team from Halifax, in Charlottetown. Now, my dad didn't have enough money to buy tickets for everybody, so he bought them for my mother and my aunt, who were big Montreal fans, because he made them Montreal fans. He didn't do that to me, though. And so anyway, myself and three of my buddies, we skip school, we go down to the rink, and we're waiting outside for the van to come. Eddie Pelchek, the old equipment guy for the Canadiens, he pulls up, says, "Okay, guys, give us a hand here." So we start helping them lug the bags in, and he says, "Okay, get back here at 4:45 today." And we're like, "Oh, really? Okay." So back we go. He goes, "Okay, you two guys go down to the Voyageurs room, and you two stay here." So here I am in the Montreal Canadiens dressing room, handing out socks to Mahovliches, Cornway, all these big stars that I watched on TV. And I'm 12 years old. Yeah. And then Eddie gives me a track top. And he says, "Okay, son," he said, "you take the sticks over to the bench." And I'm like, uh-oh. Wow. I know my mom and my aunt are in the stands, and they're going to see me. So I hear someone scream in the stands. It looks like Rick. And then it was like, it is. So I got off the hook, though, because I was in their dressing room, and I got autographs, and I got to mingle with some of the, and I still remember Frank Mahovlich. Peter grabbed three of Frank's sticks, and Peter was taller than Frank, and Frank took three of Peter's sticks, because they both shot the same way, and he cut them off, and Peter was taller than Frank, so he was pissed off. So here they are having this argument in the hallway outside the dressing room, and I'm standing there listening to it, and then I'm handing them socks, and it was unbelievable. And then to have Frank come down and do that with me the day after was like, that was so professional of him.
Wow, man. That thank you for sharing that, Rick.
Yeah,
that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
It was cool. Like, it could never convert me to a Canadiens fan, though. You converted everybody else around the house, but he couldn't do that to me. But it's funny because we could never stay up and watch past the first period in the playoffs and stuff like that. But what my dad did was he always woke me up, and I think my other brother that's 2 years younger than me, every time the Stanley Cup was given out, he would wake us up for the ceremony. And I'll never forget that, because that was ingrained in my mind from the time I was like 7 years old, the Stanley Cup. And that's what it's all about. And of course, when you get to the National League, well, that is your goal, to win the Stanley Cup. And I never got a chance to get close to it. So that was kind of frustrating.
So now, and I hear you, and I appreciate you sharing that. Now, I want to get back to these 3 years, buddy. So now, okay, so that's wonderful that you got that experience with the Big M. You ended up getting to 54, though, so you shattered the record. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the following season, you get 51, and then the next season you follow that up with a nice 52. Now, here's my question to you, Rick. Now, I want you to be completely honest. Mm-hmm. That 3-year period, you don't feel that you were the most dominant in the NHL at that time? Those 3 seasons, man. The penalty minutes, the amount of points, the 350 goal seasons. You got to put yourself up there, brother.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say that I had two good centermen during those 3 years. Billy Derlago, and then he got hurt about halfway through the 3 years, and they traded for Danny Daou, and then he was my centerman for a year and a half. So they kind of split those 350-goal seasons.
Okay.
But you got to also remember that there was a guy playing in the league at the time named Gretzky.
Yes, that's right.
So,
Oh, Wayne?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm getting 54. He's getting 9. There's a little bit of a difference there. But I will say that I was, for me, it was a big achievement because during those 3 seasons, only 2 players in the National League scored more goals over those 3 years: Wayne Gretzky, Mike Bossy.
Wow.
So I'm in pretty good company there. And
yes.
I felt pretty good about that, at the time. And, I felt good about my whole game, the way I played the game, the way I wasn't just a goal scorer. Let's put it that way. I played kind of a power forward type game, and I love to play physical. I love to go to the front of the net and, take a few whacks in the arm to score a goal. So, I mean, I like to think that I was a complete player at both ends of the rink and played a pretty physical game, but could score goals as well.
Well, I would like to back that up just a little bit more, Mr. Vaive. Now, you're saying about the complete player. Yes. And that would probably be the reason why, you had the C on your jersey, buddy. What was it, 82 to 86?
Yeah. Yeah. And
the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs from 1982 to 1986.
Yeah, it was right? It was quite an honor. Well, I got it when Darryl left in 81, I think it was early 80 or 81. And and then they made it official the next season. So basically it was 6.5 years.
Awesome.
But it was such an honor. I mean, you're growing up, you watch the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens on TV every Saturday night, and you see George Armstrong with the C on and everything, and John Beliveau on Montreal, and then you see Darryl Sittler with it on, Dave Keon in there for a little bit as well. So it was quite an honor for me, and I didn't take it lightly at all. The funny part was, and I will say this, they never asked me. Harold Ballard just came up to me one day and said, "You're the captain." I mean, that was it. But you didn't. I mean, that was Harold. That was the way Harold was. He made rash decisions that, would spur the moment. And he just came up and said, "You're the captain. You're going to be our captain." And I'm like, yeah, okay. I didn't think I was ready at 22 years old, to be quite honest with you. I thought I needed a year or 2 more to kind of settle in and get a little bit more comfortable before I took on that role. But I also thought at the time that I loved it in Toronto. I wanted to stay there. And if I had said no to Harold, I needed some time, he probably would have traded me. More than likely he would have. So, you know what? I'm glad I took it because within a year or so, I was ready. And, I took that role very, very seriously.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm sure, like you said, it was such an honor, but the pressure and the high expectations is like that's where you backed it up, though, man. Like just with the production alone, never mind the physical play and everything else that you brought to it. So I just wanted to point that out because that's a really big deal. Like as we're discussing right now, it's a tremendous deal.
Well, you know what the thing is I guess I was kind of blessed with the ability to block things out when I was growing up, and I didn't hear the fans. I didn't and I've always said, and I've said it, I'll say it right up till the day I leave this earth, that if you don't have thick skin and big balls, you can't play in a market like Toronto or Montreal, probably. If you're one of the star players, that is.
Yes.
Because you're going to get it from the press. And if you can't handle that, and I looked at Mitch Marner this year, early in the season, when he was still getting it from last year's playoffs, and then at the beginning of the year when he had a slow start, and you could visibly see in his face and his body motion that, he was feeling the pressure. And,
Yes.
So, I mean, things are got a little bit better now, but again, you got to be able to put those things out of your mind and just, and I love what I just saw an interview with Austin Matthews. They were talking about his 5-on-5 production. He said, I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about what you guys say about me. He said, and he said it politely. And he said, I love scoring goals. I love competing. And that's what I do. And I thought that was great. I thought that showed a lot of maturity in him at a young age. The fact that he recognizes that I don't care what you people think. I always had three things: how I felt, how my teammates felt, and how my coach felt. If they were happy, it was all good. I didn't care what anybody else thought. So, well, my wife actually, she was at every single game, and I'm pretty sure she told me on more than one occasion, if you don't get hit or hit someone in the first shift or two, I know you're not going to have a good game.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, happy wife, happy life.
Yeah,
goes along with look good, feel good, play good.
Play good.
With the coaches and the teammates feel that way, it usually is the same for you. That's the common theme, right, Rick?
Yeah, absolutely. But I say that about her because her brother played in the NHL for 10 years and played defense for Boston. Well, he didn't play in Boston. He played in the American League with Boston, California, Cleveland, St. Louis, and Pittsburgh.
Right on.
Bob Stewart was his name.
Bob Stewart.
Yeah. Pretty big, rugged defenseman. Great guy. In fact, my first year in the NHL was his last year. 1979, 80, yeah. And I got to play against him twice, so that was pretty cool. Playing against my brother, my future brother-in-law. It wasn't my brother-in-law at the time, but he was going to be. So
awesome, man. That's a really cool story, Rick. Honestly,
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, not many guys get to play against their future brother-in-law in the best league in the world. I wouldn't imagine.
Wow, yeah, that's spectacular. What I think is pretty cool too, Rick, is I've played with guys that do really well, prove that they can do something somewhere, and then they get traded or sign as a free agent somewhere, and then they can't do it again. You, my friend, you go to Chicago, okay, after 3-4 more years on the Leafs after that last 50-goal season, very, very productive, scoring 35, 33, 32. But bro, you go to Chicago, you almost get 50 again. You're 43 goals with the Chicago Blackhawks, right? So it's kind of like it doesn't matter where you put the Vaive, he's going to put the puck in the net. And that's the cool thing about you.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, one of the things about that too is that you got to have good line mates, and I was fortunate to have good line mate, good centerman in Toronto. I go to Chicago and playing with Dennis Savard and Steve Larmer, two of the better players in the National League.
Wow!
And I got to tell you, our line scored almost 130 goals. We all had 40 goals. And the funny thing about that was that my contract was up after that year. And I remember going to Chicago because we got paid in Canadian. But when I got traded to Chicago, it became US. And
That's
it was US taxes, right? And I always wanted to buy a Mercedes, a 420 SEL. Well, I couldn't afford it in Toronto because, I was paying 50% taxes and, I wasn't making as much after taxes. I go to Chicago, I get my first check and I look at it and I'm going, So my check, I think in Toronto after every 2 weeks was like, I don't know, 10 or almost 11,000 after taxes times 12, whatever it was that we got. So I go to Chicago and I look at my check and I bring it in. I said, I think you made a mistake. And they said, no, that's what you get after taxes. It was over 16. Wow. So I figure, but I'm only 27 years old, or 28, I think at the time. I go to the Mercedes dealership and I walk in, jeans, t-shirt after the season. And I said, I want to buy, first of all, I walk in, nobody comes near me. All these old guys are salesmen. Nobody comes near me, so I leave. I go to another one. Same thing happens. So about 2 weeks later, I go back to the first one, and there's a young guy working about 2-3 years older than me. He comes up, he says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I want to buy that car right there." He says, "You want to lease it or something?" I said, No, I want to buy it." He goes, "Well, it's 62,000, sir." And I said, "Yeah, well, it won't be by the time we sit down and talk about it." So I got out of there at 58 and wrote a check out. They cleaned it all up. I jump in the car and I'm driving by, and all the old guys are up at the window and they're all looking at me, and I'm driving by. I thought, you know what? That's pretty cool. So then I scored 43 goals. You're right. And then Bob Pulford, the general manager, offers me a $40,000 pay cut.
Really?
Like, I mean, 40, and 35 for 3 years. We're 40 less, and 35 less. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So we went all the way through the summer. Then we finally got an arbitration date set. He calls Bill Waters. He says, "Bill, fully the way he talked, he said, if you go to arbitration, you know what's going to happen." And Bill said, "Yeah, I know, you're going to trade him. No big deal." 2 days later, had a new contract. I got a $50,000 raise, or 25, 50, 50, 3 years. I'm like, why did this take all summer? You know, like, kind of crazy when you think about it. You go out and score 43 goals, and then you got to put up with that all summer long. You know, it was kind of crazy. But that was a time when, like I said, the owners had all the power. I had no power. I was 27 years old. I was 5 years away from free agency. I had no power whatsoever. So, you know, I mean, if not for the arbitration rights that I had, I probably would have had to accept a pay decrease, which is an
unbelievable.
It's a joke, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. Just before we move on, there's another thing that I just had to mention that I just realized I haven't brought up yet. Just the names of, because again, being a Toronto native, the names in these trades that you were involved with, like when you came to Chicago, right? Who goes the other way? Al Secord and Eddie Olchuk. Anyone from Toronto would appreciate that, because it's just kind of like, Rick, like you were involved with such big names of like Toronto legends, right? It's just interesting being a fan from that era, right? Like Eddie Olchuk, that was really my era of watching the Leafs. You know what I mean? Al Secord was a little bit older, right? But yeah, man, that I thought that was pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that story though about the arbitration and whatnot, because that stuff needs to be told. These are the things, Rick, that are priceless, that, you know, the listeners get to listen to that kind of stuff. History is important, man. It's very important to know.
When you think about that, if you come in at 18 years old back then, you had to play 14 years in the National Hockey League before you could become a free agent. Like, think about that. Now you come in at 18, you can be a free agent at 26.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but you had to wait till 32 back then. We had no power. I am so happy that the players have the power that they have now. I think they could get a little bit more, and I hope they do. But the power they do have now, I am so happy for them, because I went through my whole career where we had no power whatsoever, because Eagleson was in charge of the PA the whole time that I played. And I remember sitting in meetings. I was on the board of directors of the PA. And it's kind of funny, because during the lockouts and stuff that I've seen, and I've seen whoever is the head of the PA walking in to negotiate, and there's like 6, 7, 8 players walking in with them.
Yeah.
And I'd be watching this on TV, and I go, well, I don't remember any of us going in with Eagleson. That's because he didn't want us there. Because he made backdoor deals with the owners all the time, and he went in by himself to make sure we never found out about it.
Rick, he even made sure that he was in the Super Nintendo games, man.
Oh, yeah.
Like NHL 94, I think it was. You see his name and like the intro, and like as a kid, I'm like, what's going on? Who cares about this guy? Let me pick my team. Like it was very strange being a kid playing Nintendo, seeing the head of the NHLPA or whatever his title was being involved with that game. It was very, very weird. Right?
Well, there's also a conflict of interest too, because he represented players, he represented coaches, he was friends with the owners, and he was running the player association. So, I mean, all that in itself, forget about being buddies with the owners, just representing coaches, representing players, and the head of the PA, it just didn't all go together very well. And fortunately, eventually, he got caught and he went to jail. And, you know, probably rightfully so. He maybe should have spent a little bit more time there than he did. I think he was only in there for a year. But technically, he's in jail for life because he can't really go out anywhere because people yell and scream at him. And so, you know what? He got his due, and it was coming, and he got it.
Yeah. They couldn't have said it any better than that, buddy. Now, obviously, we both have a connection, you know, with the Buffalo Sabres. At that time, when you got traded to Buffalo, what was their like? Where was their franchise at that time in like with like success? Like how was the team doing when you got there?
We were doing okay. We were right there in our division. Of course, we were always in that tough division with Montreal and Toronto and some other good teams.
Yeah.
Boston were in our division.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came in at a pretty good time when Ramsey, Lindy Ruff, Mike Foligno, like we had a pretty good team. And then Rick Dudley came in as a coach and put in a whole different system. And then we finished second overall in the whole league that year. And then we lost in the second round in the playoffs to Montreal, unfortunately. But, you know, we had a couple of really good years there with Rick. And then things started to go downhill a little bit. And John Muckler came in to take over for Jerry Meehan as the general manager, fired Rick Dudley, and he took over as coach. And that was my second last year of my contract in Buffalo. And basically after that, I didn't play. I sat in the press box and ate popcorn. And then at the deadline, or before the deadline, I asked him to move me. And he said, I already tried. Nobody wants you. I said, okay, put me on waivers. He said, I already did. I said, well, no, you put me on recallable waivers, which means no one's going to claim me because you're going to recall me and try and trade me there. So I went to Jerry and I said, Jerry, listen. I've already talked to John. Hopefully you can talk to him. Maybe you guys can move me before the deadline. If not, send me to Rochester because I want to play. And I said, Ottawa and Tampa were coming in the next year. And I said, I need to be playing. I can't afford to sit in the stands anymore. So off I go to Rochester. But the funny thing was that trade to Buffalo, Sean, it was Mike Keenan was my coach in Chicago. So 43 goals a year before. Mike Keenan comes in. I'm not good enough to play regular. I just play on the power play in front of the net. So he calls me in. It's my in-laws are in town for the holidays. The day after Christmas, we're playing at home in Chicago, and Buffalo are playing at home. We're on the ice for the pregame skate in the morning. Assistant coach is out there. Mike's not. Trainer comes to the glass, knocks on the glass. Coach comes over, says, Mike wants to see you downstairs. So he tells me I'm traded to Buffalo. I got a 1:00 flight. I'm supposed to play that night for the Sabres. And there was a big snowstorm. So I don't get out until about 7:00 that night. So I'm late. Like I don't play in the game. But I don't see I've got a 2-year-old boy and my wife's pregnant. And I don't see my family until February 4th, which, you know, that could never happen. You know, those things like now I know they're kind of taken care of. They got people that look after getting the family there, getting them moved into a place and that sort of thing. So here's my wife pregnant with a young 2-year-old, having to get the moving company, the real estate agents and everybody to put everything up for sale and get everything moved to Buffalo. And now, thankfully, Dennis and Mona Savard lived in Scotland, and they really helped her out a lot. So, a
Wow.
lot of thanks to them because they were great to us when we came into Chicago.
And
But
what's Dennis's wife's name again? Sorry,
Mona.
Mona Savard.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
and they were fantastic. They were like they took care of us, made sure my wife knew everything in the area as well as myself, and they helped her when I left. And the funny, like I said, like our All-Star game was on a Tuesday night all the time back then. So I think we played in LA on a Sunday night, and I took the red eye from LA to Chicago after the game. And the next day, we had the movers come to pick up all the final pieces. I had already rented a place in Buffalo and bought a place, but it wasn't going to be ready until May. And the best part about it was the rental place was right near the new place. And we got to pick out all the stuff for the inside. So my wife, that kind of kept her busy when we got there. She was able to go to the house and pick out the flooring and the cabinets and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of neat. But not seeing your family for a month and a half kind of sucks.
Yes, 100%. And Rick, there's one thing I just I want your insight on it a little bit, just because it's just the way I am with my interest in history and culture and stuff like that. Now, the city of Buffalo, I know that they're like revamping it now, but back in 1988, 1989, 1990, were those not the heydays of the city of Buffalo and the city of Rochester? Like, wasn't that when the mills were running and the factories or smokestacks are going, and like were things booming in Buffalo at that time?
Yeah, they were pretty good. And Rochester had Kodak.
Kodak and Xerox, yeah.
And Xerox were in Rochester, so they were booming there. And the Bills were winning. The Bills were getting to the Super Bowls. They didn't win any, unfortunately, but they went to 4 in a row. And I was there during that time. So, everything in Buffalo was really, really good. It was like, people were working, people had jobs, and, and they could afford to come to the hockey games. And we played in the old Odd back then, and it was that building was electric when it was full, and it was loud. And it was a lot of fun playing there. Buffalo was fantastic. I loved the city. I loved the area where I lived. The people there were fantastic. I can't say enough about how great Buffalo was. And I was there 5 years.
Yes.
So, I really enjoyed it. I really loved Buffalo.
Rick, I'm telling you, man, like you like, I know most people think of you like as a Toronto Maple Leaf. I think of you as a Toronto Maple Leaf, but because I was part of the Sabres organization for 4 years, because I played in Rochester, like, man, you are a legend down there, bro. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, Rick, you're a legend down there. You put up big numbers when you had the chance, right?
Yeah.
So you're a legend. You put up big numbers, man. A 30-goal season for Rick Vaive is like a 60-goal season for everybody else, right?
Yeah,
so trust me, man, you don't think of it as a big deal, but I'm looking at the stats right here, man. I'm looking at the stats, and for multiple seasons, you put up huge numbers, right?
Yeah.
So you have a lot to be proud of there. Now, you mentioned
I wish I had been able to continue that, though, and play a little longer and even put up bigger numbers, because I know I was capable of it. But that was a time when I started running into some injuries. My neck, especially, had a lot of problems with my neck and shoulders. And I remember one time got hit from behind and turned my head at the last second and went in my shoulder and separated my shoulder. Well, it was about the 5th time for this one. And I think this one was 5 or 6. Anyway, they took x-rays and there was a big gap, and they said, well, there's nothing wrong with that's an old. I said, well, how come I can't move my arm? So anyway, I played a week and a half later because the doctor said there was nothing wrong with me. And I couldn't, try to hook a guy or shoot. It was nearly impossible. And that, I think, carried over to the next season. And then everything kind of went downhill from there because of the injuries. And it's unfortunate because, nowadays they're looked after so well. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean,
It is incredible though, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's really great because like these are big assets. These are assets that you're paying a lot of money to, and they're driving the revenues that you're bringing in. So you better look after them. You better damn well look after them because they're bringing in those revenues for you. Like come on, and that's what they should have been doing back in those days as well. But they didn't.
I agree.
So
I agree. Anyway. So now, there's two things I just want to touch up on. Now, one is you mentioned the neck injury. Now, being a Rick Vaive fan and being a card collector, I got Rick Vaive cards where I seen that neck guard, right?
Yeah.
And then I have other Rick Vaive cards with no neck guard. So, and it may not even have been a neck guard. What was it? Some extra protection that you had after that injury, or did you always wear that, or what's the story with that?
Well, when I hurt my neck, and it was a freak accident. It was I don't know. It was in the neutral zone, and the puck was there, and went into the boards with a guy, and I fell, and I went to reach for the puck with my stick, and Adam Graves was skating, and he wasn't watching. He was looking up ice. And his knee hit my head, and my head almost went all the way around. I mean, it was like, so that's where it all started. And then of course, our doctor said, well, the football players wear those things so that, because I had a stinger down my arm and everything, like the football players get. He said, well, why don't you wear that? Because that might, and then I went to a specialist later. He said, that was the worst thing you could do is wear this, because if your neck goes over and back, it could do more damage. So,
wow. So you tested it out and then stopped wearing it. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, was it just? Sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
No, it also was a little bit hindering the way the way you turned and the way you saw the ice and everything and what was happening around you. So I just got used to it, and I just had to get rid of it.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for sharing that, man. Because I'm sure. Hey, man, I can't be the only one to wonder, you know what I mean? Because it did look pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. It stood out. It's like, hey, cool, man. That's a cool, little protection piece he's got there, right?
Well, but it looked like a linebacker, right?
Yeah, man. But it was, tough, though. It had, a tough look to it, I find.
Well, it's funny because when the Bills were doing so well back then, I got to know all the guys, the linebacking core they had. The 4 or 5 guys, and they were fantastic. And I got to know them really well, and they were fantastic guys. And they came to a lot of our games and enjoyed watching our games. And it was funny because I remember one of them saying, "Man, that game is tough, man. I don't know if I could play hockey." And I said, "Man, your game is a lot tougher than our game. Trust me."
We say that about them.
Yeah, right? They do it every single snap of the ball.
Yeah.
We don't have to do it every single time we're on the ice. You know what I mean? And we're not on the ice the whole game. They play half a game basically, and every single play, somebody's getting hit.
Yeah, I was told by a football player, Rick, that those snaps that you just said, it's like a mini hockey fight every snap because they're you know what I mean? I can't get over it that the football players think the hockey's rougher because I'm just like you, man. I think it's the other way around. So now the other question I had was about the odd. Now I hear so many stories about this Buffalo auditorium. I never got to play in it. I saw it. I think they knocked it down or whatever, but. You know what I mean? I never got to experience that, right? When I got drafted by Buffalo, the HSBC Arena was already in place. So for a guy that's played in the old Chicago Stadium, Maple Leaf Gardens, the odd in Buffalo, is the odd in Buffalo? Do you
Montreal Forum? The Montreal Forum. I also played in, I can't even remember the name of the rink in Detroit, the original, before Joe.
St. Louis, Joe Louis Arena.
Before Joe
Louis?
Yeah, I forget the name of it. I got to play in that when I was with Vancouver. We played every team twice in their building, twice at home. So the first game was in the old building. Then that March, they opened Joe Louis. So when I got traded to Toronto, all the rest of my games were at Joe Louis Arena. So I got to play in all the original 6 buildings, with the exception
Boston.
of the actual. I played in the Boston Garden, yeah.
Garden,
and
yep.
New York was the only place, the Rangers, where it wasn't, the old Madison Square Garden.
Okay.
So,
But
it was kind of neat. It was neat, and the odd was as good as because the fans were all over top of you. It was unbelievable. Like it was like Chicago Stadium, where you had all kinds of decks, and they were kind of out over the ice almost, and the noise would just reverberate through the building like crazy. And it was so much fun. And I liked it too because the glass at the odd would move like this, like it would move a lot. So if you got hit into the boards in the corner, you go in to get the puck, guy comes in and hits you, the glass would just cushion your blow, and then off you'd come, and then he'd likely fall down. So it was kind of nice to play in a building where, the wasn't. I mean, at the Gardens and the Forum and all the old buildings, the glass was that thick. It was like hitting a brick wall. I mean, it really was. It was. I mean, I don't even know how any other way to explain it, but it was like hitting a brick wall when you got hit into the glass at the Gardens or the Forum or any of those old buildings.
Wow. So it really was the plexiglass in the Buffalo odd. Like that was where they get the flexi, because they obviously call it plexi because it's flexi. So that's pretty cool. So like now, and the reason where I'm getting at with this is especially because of last year, Rick, how the Buffalo Sabres did like result wise in the standings, and how it's been kind of the last 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. I feel that Buffalo as an organization is not getting its respect. I'm a former player and alumnus, man, and I'm hearing a lot of weird things about how it's the laughing stock, the NHL. I'm like, people don't understand the rich hockey history in that city. And I think it needs to get a little bit more respect. How do you feel about that?
I would agree. I think, but until, people don't tend to give out respect unless you earn it. And unless you make the playoffs and you win a round or you win a couple of rounds or something, you don't seem to get that respect. Well, Buffalo's gone through a tough time. Yes, I think right now they're on the right track. And I think they've got some good young players. And my son who plays in Cincinnati, they're affiliated with Rochester and Buffalo.
Yeah.
And so I know all the young guys in Rochester that they have that are going to be coming up to Buffalo eventually. One thing I like is what they did this summer and what they did, and nothing against Jack Eichel, but the whole thing that they went through with Kevin Adams. And I like Kevin. I think he's going to do a heck of a job. Kevin's going to draft and look more for character in the players as opposed to just, guys that are fast and have lots of skill. And Jack Eichel's a hell of a player, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I just didn't see him as a captain type. I watched a lot of games, of Buffalo games, and I watched his body language, and I wasn't too impressed sometimes with his body language when things weren't going the way that he would like them to. And so I think that was a smart move on their part. And they got to move away from that, move away from Jack Eichel. They got a little bit in return. I think they could have got a little more. But with his injury, it was pretty tough to get more than what they got. But I know Kevin pretty good, and I think Kevin will be looking to draft character over all those other. Well, I mean, you got to have those skills. Don't get me wrong, but there's one thing to draft a player that can skate and has great skill, but he also has great character. And those guys are hard to find. And you got to do interviews and you got to find those guys. And I think Kevin will do that. And he's already got a few guys, young guys there that have that type of character and everything. Thompson and a few of the other young guys that are going to be good players in this league.
Awesome. I'm loving hearing all this, man, because The way that I see it, Rick, is I hear you. I hear that you have to earn it, right? I
Mhm.
understand that, and I know they haven't made the playoffs. I think it's been 10 years, or even longer. Like it's been like a long time, right? But now, before those 10 years, though, the Dominic Hasek years, the Danny Briere years, the Chris Drury years. I just believe that Buffalo had a great winning percentage the 10 or 15 years prior to this struggle. And
Yeah.
so because of that, I just don't understand why people don't remember that. They don't look at Buffalo as a strong organization right now. And I believe it's a hockey rich city region, and the team is just going through a hard time. Like you said, they'll be back, man.
Yeah,
There'll
I
be
think.
glory in Buffalo.
Oh, I think there will be, and I think, Sean, I think a lot of it has to do with the city. Unfortunately, I hate to say that because I love the city of Buffalo, but
They're trying to
it's not.
revamp it.
But it's not on the map, so to speak, when
I
people
know.
talk about cities.
Yeah.
It's just not in that conversation, and that's not. I'm not saying that's right. I mean, Buffalo's a great place. I mean, I
Yep.
love it. I think it's probably one of the best places in North America to live, to be quite honest with you.
Yep.
And I would move back there in a heartbeat if I could. Other than the fact that I have a grandchild in Burlington, I think I wouldn't want to miss him that much. So I probably wouldn't. But I would love to live in Buffalo again. And I just don't think it gets enough love from the people for the city. And the city and the hockey team and the football team all go hand in hand,
Yes.
unfortunately. And when people say Buffalo, right away, everybody I remember in my days playing in Toronto, all everybody ever talked about when you mentioned Buffalo was fires. Like every day there's a fire in Tonawanda, Cheektowaga, whatever. One of those towns had a fire, and I
Amherst. Yeah.
kept thinking, like, when I got there, I thought, like, what the hell are people talking about? This is a great city. Like, it's a great place to live. And now they're fixing up all the downtown area. The Pagulas have done a great job with the Harbor Center and the hotel there. I mean, the new building, it's, you know what? One day that will be one of the cities that people are going to go, wow, I didn't realize Buffalo was that good of a sports town.
Yeah, and I mean, Rick, obviously, we got a bias because we lived there, we played there, in the region, and I'm including Rochester with this because Rochester and Buffalo are almost at the same. It's almost like the same time, like in their histories of their come ups and come downs. And like the thing is, I had Rob Ray, Scotty Metcalf, guys like that on the show, and they'll talk about how wonderful it is to live in the Buffalo and Rochester area, and players that have played there, the amount of guys that stay there and raise families there is incredible. And I remember Metter saying that he's happy that people don't think it's good there because now he gets to enjoy it all to himself. Scotty Metcalf, it was classic when he said that, right? And,
Yeah.
and I know what he's saying because, man, I lived there for just 4 straight years, man, in Rochester, and it's incredible. It's golfing in the off season. It's great hockey in the winters. It's it's
Got
awesome.
lots
You know
of
what
water in the area, lakes,
I mean? Yeah,
and
you're surrounded by water. In Buffalo, it's the only city that's surrounded by water, Rick, right? And
yeah,
like people just
it's
don't even realize stuff like that, right?
yeah.
So,
Rochester was fun. I really enjoyed my time there. We went to the semifinals that year,
oh wow.
um, and it was funny because it was a best of three. We had to play Adirondack in a best of three, and we had to start there. So we lost the first game 3-2, and then we lost in overtime in the second game. And then they went on to play St. John's, Newfoundland in the Calder Cup final. And Adirondack ended up winning. They won all 4 games on the road because St. John's had home ice advantage. And Adirondack won all 4 games of St. John's, and St. John's won all 3 games in Adirondack. So it was kind of,
Wow.
Rose was the coach there then. So I remember that because they beat us out in the semifinals. And but I loved it there. It was a great place to play. The fans there were fantastic. The people were great. Again, same thing as Buffalo. And I think, John, once this team turns around, They build the city up a little bit better. Like they're working on it tirelessly to make it better.
Yeah.
And it's going to get there at some point. But unfortunately, right now, people associate, the city with the sports teams. And, they look at it and they go, Buffalo. It's like, well, no, you don't know Buffalo. If you went there and you lived there, you would realize what a great place it is to live. But until they get there, they don't understand it.
I don't like that. I'm so glad that you said what you said, Rick, because it's just important. It's important to me. I love the region myself. I'm kind of sick and tired of people bashing it, to be honest with you. And I know, but I think that other alumnus probably feel the same way, man. Like it's a hockey-rich region, and it will rise again. Just like they say, the South would rise again, Buffalo will rise again, right?
Yeah. Well, they will. They got the football team back.
Oh yeah,
on track.
Back on track.
And they're doing well. And I think the biggest thing was Kerry and Kim Regula. They finally gave someone the reins of the football club and said, "You handle it. We don't want to get involved." And I think they're starting to do that with the hockey team and let the hockey people run things and do the things that they need to do. And Kevin Adams is a pretty smart guy. He's a good guy. I know Kevin really well. I think he's going to do a great job. Because like you said, I want people that want to be here. Well, as a general manager, that's what you want. All your players that want to be in Buffalo and be a Buffalo Sabre and play your heart out for that organization. If you don't have that, you're not going to make the playoffs. You're not going to win, period. I don't care where you are. If you don't have that, you're not going to have success.
Yes. And I forgot to add Matthew Barnaby to that list as well, man. He just, man, he loved playing in Buffalo. He loved living there and his time in Rochester. And it was great talking to those guys, just like with you, about Rochester and Buffalo, because, man, it's like, I think it's one of the best hockey setups. They're an hour apart down the thruway. You know what I mean? It's such a good setup, right? And Rochester prepares the boys for the NHL so well with the big crowds. And I just think it's so spectacular, man. Like, so I'm glad that we got.
I agree. And, when I think back at who, like Mike Ramsey, Lindy Ruff, Mike Foligno, Dave Andrewchuk, Darren Pupa, Clint Millarchuk,
a lot of Chucks.
The list goes on. Dale Howardchuk, Pierre Turgeon. They all talk very fondly of Buffalo and their time in Buffalo. And so it's not the players that have that stigma about Buffalo. It's the people up here in Toronto. And they look at Buffalo, they kind of look down at
Buffalo. Down on them. No, we could say it, man. We're both Toronto residents right now. I believe that's how people do look at it. And so I'm glad that we're able to talk this way because, knowledge is power, Rick. And when people listen to this, they're going to know this is Rick Vaive talking about this, a man that played for the Sabres, lived in Buffalo, lived in, you know what I mean? So it's very legitimate, right? So I really appreciate it, buddy. Now, I want to get into the PEI Hall of Fame before we go, bud. I want you to tell me about that honor and how you found out about that and what it was all about.
Well, they contacted me, and it's not a big Hall of Fame or anything, but
you're very humble, man.
But there's some pretty big names in there, some Olympians and a lot of NHL players that played in the NHL from PEI. I wasn't born there, but I grew up there, and they put me into the PEI Hall of Fame. It was obviously a big honor. Actually, 2 years ago, too, I was supposed to go into the Quebec Major Junior League Hall of Fame when the pandemic hit.
Ooh.
It hit in March, and I was supposed to go get inducted in April. So I don't know when they're going to do it, but maybe this year, maybe next year. I don't know. But it's just to be thought of to be in the PEI Sports Hall of Fame and the Quebec Major Junior League Hall of Fame is incredible. I mean, nobody when they start out are thinking Hall of Fame. They think, I want to make a living. I want to do well. I want to go out and show what I can do. But you're not thinking Hall of Fame at that point. And, lo and behold, and I only played 2 years as junior, which makes it even more impressive that, I got voted in and I only played 2 seasons in Sherbrooke. So, but I mean, those are big honors for me. And but it's people recognizing what I did throughout my career. And I look at it that way. It's like people are looking at it and saying, this guy deserves this because here's what he did, and I feel pretty proud about that and looking at it and going, okay, I only played 876 NHL games, but I'm still, I'm 19th in NHL history in goals per game. And all time.
Pretty cool.
And I'm like, that's pretty impressive. Like I'm pretty humbled by that. To think that I'm 19th in NHL history in goals per game, and
awesome
goals and that sort of thing. So it's all, people look at it and they look at your accomplishments and you get rewarded for that. And I've been blessed that I was able to put up those numbers and get into the PEI Sports Hall of Fame, and of course, hopefully, maybe this year the Quebec Major Junior League Hall of Fame, and who knows, maybe one day the Hockey Hall of Fame.
I think so. I think so. I think so, Rick. I know a lot of other people do too, buddy.
That would be. I don't know what. Not the icing on the cake. It would be something even much bigger than that if that ever happened. But it would be. Well, I can tell you one thing. It would be a day that I would never ever forget. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, there's many reasons for it to happen. Okay. And like being a kid growing up in Toronto, I mean, all my friends, you're the greatest goal scorer of all time for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like that's what most fans believe. That's what I believe. Okay. Mm-hmm. You did it for multiple teams. You put up 43 for Chicago. You put up 30 for Buffalo. Like, you did a lot in your career, brother. You were physical. You fought as a goal scorer. You did a lot, Rick. And a lot of people look up to you. And it's very, very important to recognize this type of stuff because you're a legend, man. You're a Toronto legend, Buffalo legend, Chicago. You're a legend too, buddy. Right? So I'm honored that I was so honored when you agreed to come on the show because, like I said, buddy, as a diehard Leaf fan, I gotta talk to these guys, man. I gotta find out some of this stuff. I grew up with you guys, right? So it was very important to me, and like I know that there's a lot more, Rick. We're talking. You're talking about never got a chance to get close to the Stanley Cup, but as a coach, you won a Turner Cup, buddy. You grinded it out in hockey and won championships, right? Yeah. And that is to be recognized as well. We didn't even get into the World Championships. We didn't get into the World Juniors. There's a lot of reasons for that Hall of Fame conversation, brother, right?
Yeah, so I was fortunate that I got to play in the World Juniors. It was the first year they picked an all-star team. And there was a young kid, 16-year-old kid named Gretzky that debuted in that tournament and then went on to do what he did, which is unbelievable. But I got to do a lot of great things. I got into coaching. I went to South Carolina and the ECHL, won a Kelly Cup there. Well, in fact, we won the Brabham Cup for the regular season and the Kelly Cup in the same season.
Sorry, Rick, just to interrupt you. So it's Kelly Cup, not Turner Cup, right?
Yeah, Kelly Cup. Yeah.
Sorry, my correction. I said Turner a few minutes ago. Kelly Cup.
Yeah, Turner Cup was the IHL, I believe.
IHL, okay.
Yeah. So Kelly Cup, named after Pat Kelly, who was a longtime commissioner in the ECHL. Yeah. And the Brabham Cup was named after one of the guys, owners of one of the original teams when the league started. And we won both of those in the same year.
And you're the only person to do that, right? I think I read that. Or one of.
Yeah, there's not very many. I think there might be only a handful if there is more than one or two. But you know what? It was fantastic. I recruited players again, and then this brings me back to what I talked about with Buffalo and Kevin Adams, because I know Kevin pretty good. I know what he's looking for. That's what I look for. I didn't look for the best guy who was the fastest skater, best player. It's like, obviously, you got to have some skill, but it was more about character. I wanted guys with character. And that year we won the championship. I made a couple of people would call risky trades at the deadline, getting rid of some talented guys to bring in guys that weren't quite as talented, but in my mind had better character. And that's what we needed to win the championship. So, I traded my best defenseman, who's a fan favorite, very skilled, got rid of him, brought in, I can't remember his name, he's from Thunder Bay, real tough
Thunder
kid,
Bay
but
boy.
yeah, real tough kid, fast, but had some good skill, penalty killer, great penalty killer. And then I got a deal from Raleigh for a young little defenseman that ended up being the quarterback of our power play throughout the entire playoffs. So he took the other guy's place and actually did a better job and worked harder. And then, Chris Rowland was the guy we brought in that I traded that defenseman for. And he was a big part of us winning the championship. I was questioned for making those moves. And I said, hey, I made them because we need these guys to win. And we went on and won. And then St. John, and then 1 year in Mississauga, and then got fired, which was probably the right thing to do after winning only 3 games that year. But the funny thing is I set out resumes, about 25 a year for the next 7 years, and never, ever got a call back from a team in any league. And I wonder, because Don and I didn't really get along well and didn't see eye to eye on everything. And I'm just wondering if he had any factor in that. I wanted to get back in the game so badly, and I still do, actually. I still want to get back in the game. I still think I have a lot to offer. I'm hoping that there's a new team going into Savannah next year in the ECHL.
Okay.
Who knows? So who knows? Something might happen. But everybody looks at me and go, well, yeah, but you're old. You're 62 years old. I go, yeah, but you know what? This isn't 62 years old. This is still a pretty good hockey mind, and I can put things together for you. So don't think of it as old. Think of it as a guy who has a lot of knowledge from all the years that he played and coached. And that's what I tell everybody.
Well, I'll tell you what, buddy. Yeah, no,
someone will bite.
Yeah, hey, I'll tell you what. Great hockey mind. And look, I know it's not the most important thing, but if you want a coach that says he's 60 years old but looks like he's 40 years old, here's the guy. If you want a coach with energy at the same level as the players, here's the guy. If you want a guy that can coach and knows systems and went through it all, has the experience, and not too bad of a goal scorer, here's the guy. Don't worry, Rick. You're highly qualified, my friend.
Almost also a sports psychologist. Before I went into coaching, I bought 5 books. 3 books on just regular psychology, and 2 were sports psychology. And I read them cover to cover several times. That really helped me with my communication skills and my ability to figure out a player in a very, very short period of time. Whether I wanted them on my team, I didn't want them on my team, do I want to trade them, do I want to get rid of them? But more importantly, it gave me really good communication skills. And that was one of the best things I had with my players, my ability to communicate with these guys on their level and to get through to them without being a dick or an asshole to them and yelling and screaming, just by sitting there and talking. And that's all that needs to be done, really. And
wow.
I mean,
yeah.
I would call, I remember one time what I did, we were really struggling. I think we had lost about 5 in a row. And I had a great captain, and he's going into the ECHL Hall of Fame this year, Brett Marietti, January 17th in Jacksonville. And I think I'm going to go down for that ceremony because
awesome.
He meant a lot to me when I was there for 5 years. He was my captain for 5 years. So I call him and the two assistants in my office. And I said, guys, tomorrow you're going to wake up, you're going to go out and get the paper, and I'm going to be ripping you three guys apart in that article. But it has nothing to do with any of you three. I got to wake all those other donkeys in that room up. And if they see what I say about you, they're going to say, oh my goodness, what the hell can he do to me if he can do that to our captain and our assistants?
Yeah.
Sure enough, the next day the article comes out. We go and set a record for 18 wins in a row at home.
Wow. Is it still a record to this day, you think?
Yeah. Well, in Charleston it is anyway.
Yes. Of course.
So it's all about communication and letting the players know that you actually care about them. Like that was, I took that from like Mike Nicolak as well when I coached, is that every day I would pick three players that I would have a conversation with. Sometimes it would be skating around before practice. Sometimes I'd go up to the guy and I'd say, I want to see you after practice in my office. And then the whole practice, he's probably thinking, oh shit, what am I getting traded? Am I getting released? And I bring him
Something
in. And I
bad.
just, some guys had girlfriends, wives, but we looked after the apartments. So I always wanted to make sure that they were comfortable. So I'd say, how's everything? Is your girlfriend happy with the apartment? This, that, how's everything going? If there's anything I can possibly do for you, you have my number. I'm available 24/7. Don't be afraid to call. And, for me, as a player, when Mike Nicolak would say things like that, for me, it meant a lot that my coach thought that much of me that he would say that to me. So, I took that from him. And Mike, I love playing for Mike. He was maybe not systems-wise, he wasn't the biggest system guy in the world, but he was a very nice person, and he came across, for me anyway, it was the best coach I had, and the coach that I played the best for, had the best years in my whole career. So that probably says a little bit about how he treated me and how I performed.
Hey man, that's priceless. It's absolutely priceless. I really, really appreciate you sharing that, because again, Rick, there's certain things people just need to know how it is and how it is in the real hockey world, and that's what we're displaying in this episode, man. And I really appreciate it. This is just priceless content that I'm getting from a legend that is an idol, and it can't get better than that. And Rick, I have to ask you, I got to put you on the hot seat, man. Would you consider coming back for a part 2 of the Sheriff podcast?
Absolutely. Why not? I have my own podcast with Mike Wilson, the ultimate Leafs fan.
Yeah.
We have a lot of guys on. I think we just had Ken Reed on from Sportsnet. He was hilarious. And he's a fellow Maritimer as well. And
yeah.
We've had I think we've done 70 some odd shows, and it's kind of fun. I enjoy it. It's just, I'm the one charged with getting the guests all the time. So it's kind of, kind of tough reaching guys sometimes, but we got Bill Barber coming up this week, and Nick Vitucci, who played in the ECHL, is in the ECHL Hall of Fame.
Nice.
John Shannon, I believe, coming up. So, we, like I say, we're on like show 75 or 6. So,
and how do people find this? What's exactly? I want to plug that a little bit right now.
Well, it's called Squid and the Ulf, ULF, which is the ultimate Leafs fan, and my nickname is Squid. And
Squid and the Ulf.
Yeah, and it's on
awesome.
Spotify.
Yeah.
YouTube.
Anywhere you could get your podcasts.
Yeah. And,
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor.
Yep. And they usually come out on Friday evenings at 6:00. And we've had some great guests, and some of the shows are fantastic. Some of them have been hilarious. We had Tiger Williams on. We had to do a 2-parter with him because it went so long. Because Tiger's got so much to talk about.
I know, but the reason why I asked you, Rick, is because there's more. There's so much more, man, that I want to get in with you. But I mean, this episode's been priceless. But we're definitely going to end it here, because it can't get any better than this, man. I'm so happy with this, and I appreciate you coming on. And I want to thank the listeners for tuning in again to another episode of The Sheriff with special guest, the legend Rick Vaive was with us today, guys. And I want to thank you again, Rick. Did you want to sign off and say goodbye to the listeners?
Whoever's listening, goodbye and have a great day. Have a wonderful Christmas. The holidays are coming up. I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to getting down to watch my son play in the new year and going down to see my old captain in Charleston inducted into the Hall of Fame in Jacksonville in January, and maybe spending a week or so down there golfing. So hopefully I get the opportunity to do that.
There you go, guys. So we're going to sign off here, ladies and gentlemen. Woo!